Hello Rebrand gang, and welcome to episode 44 of Rebrand Everything, the weekly graphic design show where we redesign the logo of big or famous companies. Today we're going to be redesigning the Microsoft Edge logo. Let's go. Sorry for the delay on uploading this week's video, by the way. I was away last week with no access to a computer, and I thought, I'll do it all on the weekend, like I'll get the whole video done in a weekend. And then the weekend turned out to be one of the most hectic weekends of my whole life, so I didn't get it done. 2 PM GMT on Saturdays is the normal uploading time, and I'm hoping to get back on track for that this week. This week Microsoft have released a new logo for their browser called Microsoft Edge. The logo used to look like this, and then this is a cool little animation reveal that Microsoft released going from the old logo to the new logo. So this new logo is kind of like a nice friendly looking icon that uses these kind of abstract shapes with rounded edges and subtle gradients to make this sort of like colourful wave. And I think the idea behind that is the wave ties in with surfing the web, which is obviously a little bit sort of cliche now, but for your average Joe and maybe not so tech savvy people, they kind of might still call it surfing the web. So the wave ties in there. But to people that are a little bit more comfortable with sort of modern tech, I think it feels a little bit cliche and a little bit cheesy and a little bit outdated as well. However, because Microsoft Edge kind of seems like that browser for people who don't want to go and choose a browser, kind of the people who just want to turn their computer on and go on Google, it might work well for them. I use a Mac anyway, so I don't really know anything about all this, but I've seen an overriding amount of comments saying that this looks like a rip-off of the Mozilla products, and I kind of had a look at that and I can see where they're coming from because it uses similar gradients, but I'm not sure it's close enough to really be an issue. But putting all that aside, I think the logo does look a little bit more in line with sort of other browser logos. I think it comes to the point where if you were going to line all of your options up, the old Edge logo looked kind of flat and sort of just like kind of dead compared to the other ones. When you look at Safari, it's kind of got a more 3D logo. Google Chrome's got a little bit more sort of like detail in there. So I think the new logo sort of puts it on the same level as the other options. I also think the logo looks pretty stylish and pretty well made. Its loose shapes give it this sort of loose and natural feel, and it's definitely an improvement over the old one. However, I think it relies a little bit too heavily on subtle gradients, which isn't always the best idea because of things like single colour applications. But then thinking a little bit further into that, I think the only real application of this is going to be on screen, where the gradients won't have any trouble being reproduced anyway, so I think that would probably just be fine. And also, even if you just used a silhouette of the outline of this shape, I think that would still be pretty iconic and become pretty clear over time. And that's just due to how big Microsoft is. They can pretty much do any icon and make it iconic over a period of time just because of like through exposure. So I think graphic designers and people who are design sort of minded will not like this new logo, but then I think like if you just think of like the general population who don't really think anything too much into design, they just see this icon on their screen one day and then a few days later they see this new one. I think they will see it as an upgrade just because it's got a bit more colour in there. I think literally just it just looks like there's more, they're getting more for their money sort of thing. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it almost doesn't matter what I think or what other designers think. I think as long as the target audience are liking it, I think they'll be happy. So anyway, that's what I think of the logo, but it's all personal opinion. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Let's get on with rebranding. Okay then, so as we're looking at the Edge logo, it seemed only right to create some different options to see what we could come up with. One thing I thought I might focus on for this rebrand is how the word edge conjures up ideas of sort of like sharpness and speed, like the concept of like cutting edge technology. I know it's cheesy, but again, it's for this specific target market. So maybe some of the options will follow that idea. I was looking at both sort of like an uppercase E and a lowercase e, just sort of like keeping the options open there, and trying to draw out interesting ways to make icons, including some sort of like edgy concept. It's kind of hard to explain, but things like a harsh cut through or maybe cut throughs, kind of like the old logo, but just sort of a development on that, whereas like a harsh cut through a smooth like E shape. And then as well as some other ideas like creating an E out of a hexagon shape just to make the design, just to make like the whole actual framework of the shape a little bit more rigid and sharp. I'm thinking that by looking at like the competitor browsers, I should include gradients in the design, just because I feel like if you don't, the general internet user might feel like they're getting a little bit less, or feel like it's a little bit less advanced. I feel like it's one of those situations where they'll feel like they're getting less for their money sort of thing. It might not be the right design choice exactly, but if it means that people feel more comfortable using it and more happy to use it and feel like they've got something new, I think that's a good thing. I did quite a lot of different sketches, some which I felt like obviously weren't going to work, but at the same time I just still want to get every single idea out on the page, because you never sort of know what that will lead to further down the line. Sometimes you draw out something that you really think is not going to work, and then as you're drawing it you sort of like, I don't know, do a line slightly wrong, and then just think, oh, that could work actually, and it kind of just, the ideas develop even from some bad ideas. I find that getting all the bad ideas out on the page as well, even when you kind of think they're bad, that's sort of essentially that's prejudging, which is something that I don't like doing anyway. So kind of just get them out even if you think they're bad, and sometimes you're surprised at what develops from that. Just a reminder that if you want to submit a rebrand idea, visit rebrandeverything.com and fill out the form on there, and I'll add it to the list. Let's get on with this.
1.
So for option 1 this week, I wanted to create this sort of free-flowing swirly E as a way of combining the old and new logo. After spending more time than I'd actually like to admit playing around with the idea, I realised that maybe I'm not actually qualified to create free art shapes like this in Illustrator, as I was having some serious difficulty bringing the idea to life, as like the free art like shape like this is just kind of like way out of my comfort zone. So to get back sort of somewhere where I was comfortable and somewhere I could create something that I actually thought looked half decent, I decided to take the idea and recreate it in kind of like a geometric manner, by overlaying perfect circles onto the actual main shape and then using the shape builder tool to sort of slice it up into pieces. I basically then just sat there using trial and error until I had something that I was only half happy with, as it was really hard to visualise how the end shape would look until I'd actually made it by expanding the strokes, and then like sweeping through it with the shape builder tool to get like to see what it's actually going to look like. And I say I'm only half happy because I'm really not the biggest fan of these sort of like swooshy logos. It just feels like the first Illustrator tutorials you do when you're getting started, and but however, for this project I feel like it's kind of like a necessary route to go down.
2.
So for option 2, I wanted to create a stroke style logo that was broken into separate parts to give like a simplified but techie vibe. I drew out a basic E shape and then split the paths up by using the direct selection tool, which is by pressing A on the keyboard, and then that just allowed me to highlight one section, and then I cut that out and then paste in place, turning this single path into 4 separate paths. From here I then used a similar technique to the technique I used for option 2 of the DeviantArt project a few months back, where you duplicate the path and then you adjust the path underneath to be like fatter or wider, and then you make that white, and then it sort of gives the illusion that there's gaps around the paths in front. But then after a little bit of fiddling around, I had something that I thought looked like almost the style I was going for, but it did look a little bit flat, and like I was saying earlier, I think the gradients do help, like with the general population sort of feeling like this is extra, they're getting more for their money. So I decided to give it like a little double divide, so we've got the white gap between each of the lines, but then also to separate it even more, we've got this like almost shadow, and this gives it just a little bit more depth. It kind of looks like the parts, instead of just sitting next to each other, it kind of looks like they're overlapping, so I thought that could look quite nice and work quite well. And the good thing is that this logo would work in a single colour application as well, even if you drop the gradient, because we've still got them white gaps, it means that the logo will still work.
3.
So for option 3, I had 2 similar concepts drawn out in the sketchbook, and basically that was a hexagon and then a hexagon at 90 degrees. And I really liked the look of the idea where the pointy part of the hexagon was at the top and bottom, but then I realised whatever I created just looked like a flipped version of the 9gag logo, and I hadn't even thought of that until I actually made it, and I was like, hold on a second, I really recognise this. And I don't know if you're familiar with the page 9gag on Facebook, but I think it was a website as well, it's like memes and stuff like that. So I just thought that was a bit of a no-go. So then that meant that I needed to proceed with the hexagon at 90 degrees, which I thought also could work nicely. So I made sure that the gap I created in the bottom right was the same height as the stroke width, so it looked strong and intentional rather than just some random slice width that might make it look messy or unfinished or just a little bit amateurish. Just wanted to make sure there was some sort of consistency in the spacing and size throughout the logo. And then once I was happy with the overall structure, I duplicated the editable version before expanding the shapes and finalising the logo. And then I used the freeform gradient effect to give it a little bit more movement in the blue. Just found that linear gradient, like what I use for my own branding, just kind of looked a little bit dull on there. So I just thought the freeform gradient gives it a little bit more movement and a few more options to just sort of make it look a little bit more detailed. And then in fact this was a perfect example of why I like to keep an editable version of the logo, because once it was finished I wanted to try it a little bit thicker. So instead of having to sort of go into my paths that I'd outlined and sort of use the offset path and everything like that, a much quicker way was just grab the editable version that I'd kept earlier and then just pump up the stroke size and then expand it again, and then basically just eyedrop a tool, and that actually brought the freeform gradient in as well, and I think it even left the points in the right place, so it just saved a lot of time there.
4.
So option 4 is definitely a little bit of a weird idea for a browser icon, but I thought I might be able to make it work with the whole word edge featured into like a circular design, kind of abstract wording, but try and get the whole word in there. So the idea was to have the two E's be the surround for the letters D and G, which would then fit in the middle, like attached or somehow interacting with the cross center beams of the E. It came together quite quickly because I developed it quite far at the sketching stage, and by doing that at the sketching stage it kind of helped me break the shapes down in my mind, so I kind of knew I had a good plan. There's not really that much more to say about this. It kind of works. It kind of looks a little bit weird for a like browser app icon to contain all 4 letters of the product, but I feel like it's kind of iconic and abstract enough to get away with it. Although looking at it again, it kind of just looks like a circle and an app called DG, so I'm not sure if it will work, but you'll just have to let me know in the poll and in the comments.
5.
So for option 5, I wanted to create something similar but different to their previous logo. So kind of maybe introducing the idea of the wave, or maybe just some sort of different like sharp sort of edge look in there. I didn't really have that much of a set plan when I went into it. I just knew I wanted to sort of adapt an E to somehow look like more of a logo, more of an icon than just an E or just something that looks bland. So I liked the idea of an E, but I thought maybe I could develop that to include some nice like sharpness or some sort of like iconic look that maybe had double meaning, such as the wave. I started with these sharp shapes and then started thinking about creating an eye shape behind the crossbar of the E, which is a little bit of a mad idea, but like I said earlier, I kind of just like to play it out and see where we go with it. And that ended up looking a little bit crowded, but it gave me the idea of taking the negative space from the E and then using that as a continuation of itself to create this sort of like wave style design, which obviously ties in with the surfing the web, great idea. This gave a sort of edgy look, and it also kind of tied in with the wave concept, so I thought it might work quite well as an icon. I'm not sure how far the branding would need to go for a web browser, because they don't normally have like anything other than sort of the app icon and then maybe a website just where you can download it from. But the shapes created for this option would give you a lot to work with on the rest of the branding, so I thought that was kind of a plus point for this. Okay then, Rebrand gang, before I show you them final options, I just want to remind you to press the little button up here and vote for your favourite option, and then head straight down to the comments below and let me know why that was your favourite and what you would have done to make it better. If you like this video, please remember to press like, and if you want to see videos like this every single week, then press subscribe and put the little bell on to make sure you're the first to get the notifications and watch. Okay then, Rebrand gang, let's see them final options.